meeting, you'll see what I mean.
Good evening, everybody. Good evening, everybody. Any members or officers in physical attendance with an electronic device should mute it to avoid feedback. Any remote participant, please keep your camera and microphone off unless you wish to speak, and ideally do not use the camera facilities at all, as this can affect the quality of the IT connection. The meeting may be recorded, and data collected during the recording of the meeting will be retained in accordance with the Council's data retention policy. The recording of the meeting may be added to the Council's websites. Members accessing the meeting remotely should use their Swale Borough Council or Kent County Council laptop to participate virtually. If you join using the link on the website or on a mobile device and a tablet device, it is not always possible to identify you, and you may not be recorded as being in remote attendance. All right, welcome members, officers and any members of the public to this licensing committee meeting, including visiting members, members of the public. The following staff in attendance are either in person or remote: Conscientious Lawyer, Mid-Kent Legal Services, Helen Ward; Community Service Manager, Steph Curtis; Licence Team Leader, Chris Hills; Licensing Officer, Joe Thompson. Mo's not here.
Joe's here, but Mo's not.
Yeah. Joe Thompson, Mo's not here. Democratic Service, Philippa Davies. Are members all aware of the emergency evacuation procedure? There is no planned evacuation, and if the alarm sounds, the Democratic Services Officer will direct you all in attendance safely out of the building and into the car park. The lifts must be not used. Is there anybody in attendance with mobility issues? Please indicate now. No, you all look a fit lot. Right. Are there any apologies for absence?
Thank you, Chair. Apologies have been received from Councillor Rich Lehman, who is substituted by Councillor Terry Thompson, from Councillor Mark Last, who is substituted by Councillor Anne Kavanagh, and from Councillor Simon Clark. And also Councillor Paul Stephen is attending remotely. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, item 3, minutes. Do members take the following minutes as correct recordings? The minutes of the meeting held on the 13th of February 2024, minutes numbers 624 to 630, and the 15th of May 2024, minutes numbers 27 to 28, and accept the following licensing subcommittee minutes: 26th of March 2024, minutes numbers 791 to 794, 22nd of April 2024, 10 a.m, minutes numbers 836 to 839, 22nd of April 2024, 12 p.m, minutes numbers 840 and 843. You're all happy with that? Right, I will sign those later. Are there any declarations of interest? We have no one registered to speak. Item 6, pavement licensing policy amendments. I invite the officer to introduce the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. This report is to inform members of recent changes to pavement licence legislation brought about by the Levelling Up and Regeneration Act 2023, which have required amendments to the existing Swale pavement licence policy that was adopted by this committee on the 19th of October 2023. And it's also to ask members to consider what fees to now charge for pavement licence applications and the length of time any granted licence should be for. Pavement licences were originally introduced under the Business and Planning Act 2020 in response to the coronavirus epidemic and provided a faster, easier and less expensive application process to enable businesses that sold food and drink to have outdoor tables, chairs and other street furniture. And this was as opposed to a licence which was up until then obtained from KCC as the highway authority. The permission was intended to be only temporary, expiring on the 30th of September 2021, but this has been extended in subsequent years and the current permissions will expire on the 30th of September 2024. The Levelling Up Act has now made pavement licensing a permanent function of local authorities and made a number of changes, which are to extend the public consultation period and the council determination period from 7 days to 14 days each, to prohibit KCC from granting a tables and chairs licence if a pavement licence can be granted instead, to allow pavement licences to be amended by the council with the consent of the licence holder if it is considered that the conditions on the licence are not being met. It gives the council enforcement powers that previously fell to KCC, which include being able to remove furniture if a premises is not abiding by its pavement licence conditions and hours. The licence holder will then have to pay the council's reasonable costs in removing the furniture and storing it. The council can refuse to return the furniture until the costs are paid. If payment is not received within 3 months, then the council can dispose of the furniture in any way it sees fit, including selling it and keeping the proceeds. The maximum duration of pavement licences has been extended from 1 to 2 years. However, the length of the licence is at the discretion of the local authority. The fees that councils can charge applicants has increased from £100 maximum to £500 for new applications and a maximum of £350 for renewal applications. The policy, which is shown as Appendix 1 to this report, has been amended to reflect these changes. And as they are legislative changes, there is no need for the policy to go out for public consultation. Therefore, members are asked to consider 2 things, which are whether you are happy that the duration of licences should now be 2 years. This is the preferred option of the licensing team. A lesser period involves unnecessary bureaucracy and a financial burden for applicants and existing licensees, as well as extra work for the licensing team. Secondly, members can consider what fees you think are appropriate. It is the preferred option of the licensing team that for this year we charge the maximum of £500 for any new application and £350 for all renewals. Our reasoning for this is because £100 does not cover the assessment and processing of an application to date. The government has paid the council £5,000 annually as a burdens payment, so they obviously recognise this fact. We are unsure whether these payments will continue now that councils have the authority to charge more for the licences, so we would like to keep a watching brief on this and then review the fees in 12 months' time, when a full assessment of the impact of the new requirements and the cost of the council can be made. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. I open up the debate for members to ask questions. Councillor Tony Winters.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, overall I think it's a very good report, and I do agree with basically instead of having to renew every year, to renew every 2 years. But one thing I have a concern about is for the fees going up to £500 for new applicants. It may be a situation where somebody wants to set up a stall or a couple of stalls or whatever in the high street with no basic profit funding available, setting up perhaps new stalls. So I do have concerns about that. So it does seem rather a drastic increase, but fully understand with inflationary pressures, obviously the £100 is not covering it, but I'll listen to the rest of the debate on it. Thank you.
Yeah, as far as that's concerned, I mean, this is really why we're having this debate. We have tried to do some benchmarking, but I think most authorities are like us. This didn't come in until the 31st of March. So I think most authorities are probably going through their own committee processes to see what their fees are going to be charged. having done a ring round of most of the authorities in Kent, I can say that most are also opting for 500 and 350, with the exception of Ashford, that are only charging the £100. They say they have very few pavement licences and no issues. That has been different for us. The other authority is the licensing partnership of Sevenoaks, Tunbridge Wells and Maidstone. They have the partnership between them. Now they are charging 430 for a new application and 280 for a renewal. However, their licences are only going to be granted for a year. So overall, they will be more expensive than us. Having done a Google round the rest of the country as best I can, it would seem that most authorities that have already published their fees are going for the maximum. So it would appear, I think, that most authorities are probably going to take what we're proposing, which is to keep a watching brief, see if we get these burdens payments, which I personally feel are going to stop, and also how the implications of having these new requirements, which may at the end of the day cause some compliance issues which we haven't already had. I mean, we have had issues, probably more than some authorities, but that's where we're coming from. But of course it's over to members to decide.
Councillor Nundy.
Thank you, Chair. Is there a ballpark figure for how much it... I know you're saying that £100 doesn't cover it, but is there a ballpark figure that we can have? Because I don't feel confident in making the decision about the money without actually knowing how much it costs.
Right, I would say because it was always just this mandatory fee, we haven't done any costing, I have to be honest with you. Right,
because I just think that it's going to have a really detrimental impact on small businesses, which I think is something we should be trying to encourage. A big company like Costa or Starbucks, £500 to them for a new application, that's a drop in the ocean, that's pittance, that's nothing. They could throw that away and not notice it. Whereas a small cafe or a small independent pub, well, they're going to struggle to pay that. They're going to struggle to come up with the money. So I would suggest that it's difficult to suggest an amount that's lower than £350 and £500, but if it's £100 for, I'm guessing it's 1 year at the moment and it's been extended to 2, well, £200 for 2 years would probably be reasonable, because it's still only one set of work, and then maybe reducing the £500 to £350. I don't know how other councillors feel about that, but that would be a suggestion that I would perhaps make, just to try and support small independent businesses in the current climate.
Yeah, as I say, we've put this forward, and it is entirely down to yourself. I agree that there probably is also a difference between those premises that have pavement licences but also have a premises licence and sell alcohol, because they pay very, very little for their annual fee to maintain their licence. But then, as you say, with cafes, this probably is a little bit excessive. You know, you could go whatever way you like, but I appreciate what you're saying, and obviously we are to be led by the consensus here tonight. We could always come back to you anyway, which we intended to do next year when we had costed this out properly, taking into account what the new amendments were going to, if they were going to have an impact. But if you would like us to charge a lower fee, we'll do so, obviously.
How many licences are we talking about in Swale at the moment, roughly?
18.
18.
Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair. First and foremost, I think it's really sensible that we deal with all of them, not some with KCC, some here, because it's got to have been really hard to police it. Secondly, we can't be operating at a loss. I hear what you're saying. Maybe in a year's time, we need to see how we are. But if every other council practically is charging that amount, and we are now going to have an enforcement function, storage, if we have to confiscate stuff, there's so many variables. I hear what Councillor Nundy is saying, but businesses who want to have a pavement licence have got to pay out for the fencing, the chairs, the tables as well. This will be something extra. So I would rather err on caution and go for the maximum amount so that we're not at a loss. That's all. Thank you. Very good report. Thank you. Oops.
Thank you, Chair. Just to pick up a little bit, the fees that are contained within the report are for the application. They don't cover enforcement costs. And if, for example, the authority needed to remove furniture, then there is provision for that to be charged separately within the legislation. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. I'm sorry, looking at what other councils charge is not good enough. Why are we not doing our own costings? That's my question. 3 times the increase from £100 is a bit extortionate. We should be supporting independent businesses because a lot on the high street are already well, they're looking to rent them out or are on for sale unofficially. Thank you.
Yeah, I
Thank you, Chair. So, Councillor Kavanagh stole a little bit of my thunder in terms of what she was saying in terms of the fees. The 2-year bit, I really get that, and I think it's helpful and that's useful. So we are, again, being seen to have given. But at the same time, sadly, that old phrase of we don't know what we don't know. And heading towards the next 12 months, you know, what's to say that suddenly the fees are bumped and we're left in a really vulnerable position. So at a personal level, I would go with the officer's recommendation, and it's a very, very well written report. And notwithstanding what Councillor Nundy and Councillor Valls have both said, my expectation wasn't that we'd be coming here tonight and have that in-depth pounds, shillings and pence review of where we are. So, but thank you very much anyway. Thank you.
No, I think I agree with the guys there. I was just going to put some figures that it's basically if you're running a 6-month period over that 2-year period for your extra license, you're looking at probably getting a more than a 33% turnover in income, and that only equates as a fee of £1.60 per day. So I think it's pretty fair. And as you pointed out, I think if you get problems, we've got to then manage that. So I think it's quite fair.
I must say that we are really pleased that we've been given the enforcement powers. I sat in with a meeting that was chaired by Larissa, where we had quite an aggressive resident and a pub, and they'd fallen out, but the pub was at fault that he'd been told to remove his benches and he hadn't done so. And we had the gentleman from KCC there who said, and this was September, I'll have those benches on a low loader if I have to do it myself. It took him till October of next year. Now, I can guarantee you that the Swale licensing team won't do that. So we are very reactive. So we're really pleased that that type of opportunity will come to us to do. So we feel that the legislation is strengthened, and you know, that's great. I was always aware of the fact that coming to committee without costings and going for the maximum was going to cause a little bit of uncomfortableness, which is why I'm not going to strongly try to defend anything. It is entirely down to how you feel about things. And yes, but there are some businesses out there that have pavement licences who have got very, very tiny premises. Without the pavement licences, they wouldn't have a business. So for them, I think that the cost of what they would be paying would be reasonable. I do understand what you're saying in terms of we have got some that only have a couple of tables and chairs. Now, you may feel that perhaps some sort of compromise could be that we would charge one fee for up to X number of tables and another fee for tables and chairs that go beyond that, thinking on my feet. But that may be something that would be more acceptable to you, and that those premises that actually are really reaping the benefit of the pavement licences get to pay a reasonable fee for it, and those with others where it's a bit of an add-on. So perhaps you could do the £100 for the smaller businesses that only have a couple of tables and chairs, and 350 for those that have, I suppose, beyond 5, something like that. That might be something that you'd want to consider.
Thank you. I just want to come in on a point, Chris, just to make you aware that the fee you can't make a profit, and it needs to cover the cost of the consultation and processing the application. And I think to split that fee regarding how many tables and chairs will be very difficult to justify where the costings haven't been provided. So it might be that if that's something that members are interested in, it would be a matter of going away to find those figures out rather than agreeing that tonight. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Moores.
Yeah, thank you. I think it's brilliant, like you say, that we've got enforcement, like the powers of enforcement, and it's like you said, that will be an extra cost that will be recovered if you. So this is for the, like you say, the licence and the consultation. I think it's very unfair that without any real notice, the fee is going to go up tremendously. I think if we don't know costings and things like that, then for maybe the 6 months, year, we need to keep it the same until we know the costings, and then we can have a better, and we can explain to businesses then, because I think if you look at our high streets, they're struggling as it is, and to increase that cost so much, it is going to have a severe detriment to businesses, and we want to get people back into our high streets and shopping locally, rather than going to the big, driving miles away to all the big places where we want people to shop local and use our small local businesses. And I think it really would be a detriment. I think, like I say, if you need to discuss the costings and everything, I think you keep the fees. Personally, I think the fees stay the same until the costings are known. Then, obviously, we can explain why the costings have gone up.
Councillor Ben Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I actually think that the officers are on the right track here. If you, having worked and managed pubs and coffee shops in the past, your GP on a cup of coffee is about 90%. Your gross profit on a pint is usually around 30 to 40% if you're lucky. And most of that's due to where the brewery and the tax is rather than anything else. In terms of when I was running those sorts of establishments, the difference between paying 350 quid or 500 quid for my first pavement licence wouldn't mean an iota to me. I'd be paying my 500 quid out, because I know damn well I can get more bums on those seats over the summer, and that's going to make more than that money back for me. So in that regard, I don't think it's as big an issue for the businesses as we're concerned about, and obviously we can look at that and review that over the course of the year. What we can't do is, if we then make a loss on doing these licences this year and then there's no burden payment, go and find that back. I'm sorry, we'll be talking about another parking charge increase to cover that loss. And we know how painful that is when we get to the budget meeting at council. I think realistically, it's not as actually that large an increase when you think that it is going from 1 year to 2. Let's face it, 100 to 350, and then divide it by 2 is not that bad. I think with the enforcement powers as well, we will be onto a good position. Don't get me wrong, it would be great to be able to say we can't charge this because we need to support businesses, but we need to make sure that our own coffers are also being kept well. And when we look at those other councils that are charging less, well, Ashford, realistically, there's nowhere to put a pavement licence to bench anywhere, frankly. And when you look at the others, they have much larger burden. Realistically, they're dividing their costs up amongst 3 authorities, not 1. So actually, this seems common sense to me.
Thank you. Councillor Noy.
Thank you, Chairman. Given that it'll be extended to 2 years, will certainly be welcome, and it will help absorb some of the costs, but it is a rather large increase. Sort of going back to 4.4, where you're saying that it needs to be cost neutral and not to make a profit, it would be prudent to at least know roughly what those costs are. Basically everything else has already been said at this point. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wincliffe.
Thank you, Chair. If I have a seconder, I would like to go along with the licensing officer, Chris Hills, before we agree the £500, if I understood.
I've still got people want to speak.
Oh, sorry about.
So
I thought you called me.
No.
Oh, my apologies.
Councillor Jackson.
Thank you, Chair. Nobody likes to pay more, but unfortunately that's just a fact of life at the moment. We're all having to pay more for our electricity, gas, etc., community charge. I can only talk for what I see in Faversham, and the chairs that are on the pavements on both sides for some cafeterias, they're always full, and I do know they make an awful lot of profit from the selling of cafe, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Palmer.
Thank you, Chair. I think I agree with Tom about the businesses that need some help. And I just wondered whether there was an option for, with the payments for smaller businesses, do they have to pay that all in one go at the beginning of the application, or can it be sort of spread out over, say, 6 months or something of payments?
There's nothing in the legislation that says how it's to be paid, but it is considered to be an application fee or a renewal fee, so therefore you would expect it to be paid at the point of application or the point of renewal. I don't know whether there is something where we could spread it out.
You know, if it's somewhere like...
Yes, Helen.
We have the wonderful lady to my left who's going to let us know.
The legislation does require the application to be accompanied by the requisite fee.
Thing that worries me, if we don't go with this recommendation, and then the £5,000 is taken away from us, we're going to be in a loss, aren't we? And considering it is a big increase, but it's over 2 years. So. Yeah, have I got a proposal? Oh, can I? Hey?
This isn't over 2 years. It may be a 2-year thing, but we've just been told that the payment has to be made in full with the application. So I get that it will last for 2 years, but if you haven't got the money to put up front, you haven't got the money to put up front. It could last 20 years if you can't afford it.
Right, do I have a proposer for the recommendations as put down? Oh. Okay, Councillor.
Yeah, I think I agree similarly with Councillor Nundy that if we haven't consulted businesses on this, there's been no consultation because it's only just been a new sort of amendment. How can we justify saying, well, you paid £100 last year and now, sorry, your renewal's £350, but it's going to be 2 years? There's been no consultation. Now, I know it was a different policy and things, but taxi fees and everything had to go out to consultation. So why isn't this then the same, having to go out to consultation as costings, rather than, because obviously it's a maximum we can charge, so it can be anywhere in between.
Thank you. Just to clarify, taxi fees do have to be consulted on. That's what the legislation says. But these types of fees, there is no requirement to consult on them.
Right, Oh, sorry, Councillor Thomas.
It was just a little point about the fees and the fact there hasn't been, if you like, information and evidence. And I feel that if we put this forward over the 2 years, we can then find out what fees or costs might come from having to implement action within the streets. So I think over that 2 year period, we can then, accumulate what our costs might be. If it ends up being super low, then maybe we can amend something later, but it might end up more likely to be expensive. So I think it's quite worth doing it as it is.
Right. Could I have a proposer for the recommendation that is being put forward? Seconder? Councillor Thomas, proposer. Councillor Ben Martin, seconder. So shall we have a vote on that and see where we are? Those in favour? Do you make that 8? Those against? Any abstentions? It's been carried. 8 in favour, 4 against, and no abstentions. And then we got recommendation to the scrap metal.
Yeah, I think you've moved on to scrap.
Yeah. Right, item 7, scrap metal policy. I invite the officer to introduce the report. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. At the last meeting of the Licensing Committee on the 13th of February 2024, members gave approval to put a draft scrap metal policy out to consultation with licence holders and members of the public. Members will recall that there had been no changes to the relevant legislation and the draft policy remains unchanged from the previous one adopted in July 2018, which was last reviewed in July 2021. This report presents the results of the consultation for members' consideration. The consultation evaluation grid can be found as Appendix 2 on page 65 of the agenda. There were a total of 3 responses to the consultation, 2 of which were comments and not recommendations for change. The third response makes 2 suggestions for ways in which scrap metal sites could deter the trade of stolen metal. However, the Scrap Metal Dealers Act 2013 is very specific on imposing conditions and does not allow local authorities to add conditions to a scrap metal licence other than those stipulated within the Act. It is not therefore permissible to include these suggestions in the policy, but we recognise that they are valid suggestions that can be communicated to the trade as examples of best practice. Consequently, there are no suggested amendments to the draft scrap metal policy, and this report asks if members are happy to recommend it to Policy and Resources Committee for approval and publication. Thank you.
Thank you, Jo. I open up the debate for members to ask questions.
you very much. So this report is to present members with a draft Gambling Act statement of principles and to invite comments on it prior to it being put out to public consultation. The Gambling Act specifies that a local authority must have a statement of principles, that is a policy, and that it must be reviewed at 3-yearly intervals. It is also a statutory requirement that the statement is adopted by full council. This edition of the statement will run between the 1st of February 2025 and the 31st of January 2028. Originally, the Statement of Principles that Swale published was developed via the mechanism of the Kent Medway Regulatory Licensing Steering Group to ensure consistency of approach and therefore minimise the risk of legal challenge. However, during the years since the Gambling Act took effect, councils have tended to change their statements according to individual needs, and therefore this Statement of Principles has been prepared using a model template as supplied by the Gambling Commission and takes into account the guidance published by them. The Gambling Commission has indicated that the revised guidance to the 2005 Act will be issued within coming months, which may require local authorities to amend their Statement of Principles, but that this will not be in time for any revisions to be included in the current draft and to go through the committee and council process. They have therefore advised that local authorities should rubber stamp what they have in place at present with this in mind. Whilst it's not a legal requirement, the Gambling Commission recommends that local authorities should compile a local area profile, an LAP, to assist any applicants for gambling premises licences who are required to submit a risk assessment as to how their proposed activities would affect a local community. Most local authorities do not compile such an LAP. However, the licensing team felt that it was important that Swale did, bearing in mind in particular the holiday centres and parks within the borough which abound with gambling machines of all types, and also to demonstrate best practice. Our LOP is included as an appendix within the Statement of Principles, so that if necessary it can be amended without having to review the whole of the policy. There is no set format as to what we should have included, but we have included as much information as we've been able to gather, and the LAP is shown at the beginning of page 125 of the agenda. Members should also note that a local authority can pass a resolution under section 166 of the Gambling Act not to issue any gambling casino premises licences. Swale has not passed such a resolution previously, and unless members think otherwise, is not intended to do so now. Members will note that the proposed consultees for the statement are far-reaching to ensure that any group or body that may have an interest in gambling-related harm is alerted to the fact of this consultation. All comments received during the consultation will be entered onto a grid for consideration by the Community Services Manager and the licensing officers, and a recommendation will be made as to whether or not to amend the statement as appropriate. Experience is that despite consulting with a large number of interested parties, it is rare to receive a response, and we have no reason to believe that we will receive responses this time around, especially as nothing within the statement has changed. If this proves to be the case and no substantial comments are received, members are asked to consider whether to give officers delegated authority to refer the statement straight to P&R committee with a request that members of that committee ratify the statement so that it can be presented to an autumn meeting of full council for formal adoption and then published within the statutory timeframe. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. I open up the debate for members to ask questions. Right, let's... Did you put your name up, Tim? No. Councillor Kavanagh.
Thank you, Chair. A very thorough report. My experience of gambling probably extends to 2p machines. That's about it. But the one thing I didn't understand in it was the different category of gaming machines. I don't know if I'm alone there, whether it would be handy to have an appendix just explaining which the different categories were. I certainly would find it handy, maybe others would, but yes, very enlightening, thank you.
That is very easily done. We do have a table for that. It explains that it's different stakes and different prizes so if you look at the front of a gaming machine, if you look somewhere on it, it will have a category. Now, if it's category D, that is the lowest stakes that can be bet or what have you, and they're the ones for your children. They will include the grabbing machines and all of that type of thing. And then there's certain category C machines with money. The higher, the category B machines are the ones where there are the higher stakes and there are the higher amounts of money that can be won. Now, the one thing that was a real issue until about 2-3 years ago was the category B1A machines. They were your fixed odds betting terminals. They were known as the crack cocaine of the gambling world because you could have a stake of £100 a minute, and that is where people were obviously getting themselves into real problems. The Government and Gambling Commission actually did recognise that, and the stake for those is now £2. But I can very easily include that within the policy, and I can email that round to members of this committee tomorrow.
And those of us substituting as well, please.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Christine. That's a good idea. Councillor Winkles.
Thank you, Chair. Just quickly, I mean, Councillor Kavanagh beat me to it, actually. I was going to say the same. It's a very good, comprehensive report. I'm totally can't see any issues of amending it as far as I'm concerned, and I'm totally in agreement with going to the next stage to PR. Thank you.
Councillor Nunday.
Yeah, very comprehensive report. I think gambling is a very serious issue, so I'd agree absolutely with recommendations 1 and 2, but I do think this needs to come back to the licensing committee for real scrutiny, because I've been to arcades, I've been to casinos, I've been to the shops on the high street, and I've literally watched people put 200-300 quid in one go into a machine and walk out with nothing. So I really think that out of everything that this committee looks at, that gambling is probably the most serious and probably has one of the biggest damaging effects on society, and absolutely requires our utter scrutiny. Thank you.
Councillor Noel.
Thank you, Chairman. On page 80-15, when they're talking about interested parties, it says, in considering whether a person lives sufficiently close to a premises, it lists a few things here. One of them is the potential impact of the premises. Now, it focuses on the people, so the number of customers, the routes likely to be taken by those visiting the premises. One thing I might consider here is also the impact of noise and lights. So, for example, gambling establishments are open later than some other establishments, which means you're going to get more noise. You're going to get problems with the lights and that. So I'd like to see that taken into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. With the Gambling Act, it has different licensing objectives to the Licensing Act, for example, and public nuisance is not one of those. So matters relating to noise and light pollution would not normally be dealt with under the Gambling Act or a matter for a gambling premises licence. Just to go back to the interested parties, that again is something that's set in the Gambling Act 2005, and it's with the Licensing Act, an interested party could be anyone. With the Gambling Act, it is more specific about who that can be, and there is an element of subjectivity that is normally a determination for the licensing team, and that's how they guide themselves to decide whether someone is sufficiently interested to be relevant to make a representation. I hope that helps.
Are there any more questions? There are 3 recommendations. Do I have a proposer for the...
It's recommendations plus the addition of the table to the policy.
Sorry?
It's the recommendations plus the addition of the table to the policy. So 1, 2, 3 plus the licensing team add the table to the policy.
Yeah. Right, so do I have a proposer for the agreed recommendations 1, 2 and 3 and to the table being added to the policy?
I propose Councillor Winkles.
Seconder? Who was first? Councillor Carol Jackson, second. Right. Could I have a show of hands, all those in favour? Any against? That's 2. Any abstentions? Well, that's carried. 10 in favour, 2 against, no abstentions. Thank you, members, for coming out on this very hot night. I now close the meeting at 19:44. Didn't beat my record.